How everybody doing tonight? We live. We live, man, with the part one. Breaking down Martin Luther King's legacy. Part one. I decided to break it down into two parts because this backdrop that I'm using, this debate that they had on MLK Day, it's I believe it's 3 hours long. So uh we're gonna watch it together, but I'm gonna do one part today, one part tomorrow. We'll be going live tomorrow. Between 12 and 5. I can't really say exactly what time at the moment. Um, so let's get into it. And before I even get into this, I want to say this here. Because you'll have people who will say, however, whatever, it's his legacy, whatever he did right, whatever he did wrong, let's let it go. Let's move forward. We're in 2026. What does he have to do? With anything he has to do affecting us now? That's a good question, right? Excuse me. What we have to understand is this. We see the current condition that our community is in, and nobody have answers. Nobody have answers. It's all about blaming somebody else, particularly the white man, but it's always blaming somebody else. And you look and you say to yourself, well, black people are in the golden era, the best time that they ever was alive on this earth. They're educated, influential, they have capital, you name it. There's nothing holding us back at this point. Um, but what I would call the CRTD, which is the civil rights transmitted disease. Who created that disease? Martin Luther King was one of them, the head of it. You know, Martin Luther King turned a trying people into a crying people, and that disease still exists with us today. Doesn't matter what the situation is, doesn't matter what it is. Any type of situation where black people are in a situation, job site, court system, whatever you want to call it, and it's not going their way, they're being held accountable in any form of fashion, is racism. Is the white man. Is This is not what we were doing. Contrary to popular belief. And I got videos on this about my channel. As a matter of fact, 1 year I actually did a video about this on MLK's birthday. And again, what I'm going to be doing with these 3 times a week live is I'm going to be speaking on a lot of different subjects. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to revisit some of my older videos and I'm going to use them as a lesson, right? To break down with you guys because, in some of those videos, every year I've evolved when it comes to depth, when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to wisdom. So I want to revisit those things. And they made it kind of went over the YouTube universe and kind of like got disappeared. But I'm gonna bring them back, and like I said, I'm gonna use them. I'm gonna use my own work for a lesson, and I'm gonna break it down. And I got one of those videos. I might have two about Martin Luther King. And I kind of looked going to archive and find them, but I couldn't because I don't really know if I labeled them Martin Luther King or if I labeled them and put them in the file of message to the black community or my other file cabinet of black people can we talk. I'm not really sure, but I will find it. We'll break that down in the future. But this debate was just recently had a couple of weeks ago for Martin Luther King's birthday, and I wanted to break it down and dive into it. Now, the next thing, people will say, well, okay, we listening to this. Who are their sources? How do they know that all of this stuff that was being said about Martin Luther King was actually true? These were white people or whoever people who came up with this stuff. They just hate him. First of all, we know that's a lie because white people love Martin Luther King. Even racist white people love Martin Luther King. They'll try to use Martin Luther King to control you, especially the white liberals. But I digress on that. But the thing was because he had so much power and influence, the CIA was following him everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. It was following him when he was in Norway, accepting the Nobel Peace Prize. Um, they was constantly following him. Same thing they was doing with Malcolm X. And the report that they got from Malcolm X was wherever he had speaking engagement, he was in his room the whole time praying, excuse me, reading. Whereas Martin Luther King, every time he was in another place having a speaking engagement, he had women. He was fornicating. Now I'm not one to judge a man. I don't even judge a pastor. I won't judge a pastor from his sexual prowess. I understand it's not, I'm not justifying it. But as a man, I understand how men are, especially when they in power, how women will just fall on you. Um, I don't respect it if you married and you committing adultery. Um, and I, as a man of God, I can't never um, support fornication. But I understand. Like if I'm going to a church, and I want to break this down and give you an understanding of what I mean. If I'm going to a church and they got a pastor there who's filled with the Holy Spirit and he preaching the word, but he just so happened to fall and end up messing with one of the sisters, I could forgive him for that because God gonna forgive him for it. I can forgive him for that, and that doesn't affect his message. What I won't respect and what I won't be a part of is a place where it's a pastor who is knowingly twisting scripture, twisting doctrine because he want money and he want to pander to a certain group of people versus actually freeing people's souls. And so this is the same thing, and this is one of my big issues that I have with MLK. It's not about all of the women he was with. That's his business. I mean, he was wrong for doing that to his wife, and that's another story for another day. Even the gate, this man was allegedly in gay orgies. Um, what's not James Baldwin, but I believe it was Bayard Rustin. These was two of his civil rights brothers who were both homosexuals. And it actually was a rumor that he was sleeping with one of them. I forgot if it was Bayard Rustin or James Baldwin. And when it came down to the come down, he was told that if he didn't step down from a particular organization he was with, that this person gonna come forward, and he stepped down. So I mean, do with that what you made. But like I say, so in this video, so do with that what you made. He was a very, very, very sexually active brother. Again, when he was in Norway, accepting the Nobel Peace Prize, he was caught chasing two white women naked down the hall. The guy was a real, I would say, freaky individual. But again, that's not my business. He a man. We make those type of mistakes as men, not with other men. I ain't, but I understand on the other stuff, but not the gay stuff. But I digress. Um, and so my issue with him is the message that he put forth and how he turned a trying people into a crying people. Because contrary to popular belief, before the civil rights movement, black people were doing fine. As a matter of fact, they were doing excellent. There was no murders, black on black crime didn't exist. Of course, abortion didn't exist at that time. Um, Black incarceration was so low until it was almost non-existent. Matter of fact, the people who were killing each other and calling themselves gangsters was white people. The Al Capones, the Machine Gun Kelly, the John Dillons. These were the people who were killing each other. The mob. These were the people who were killing each other, getting in crime, going to prison. If you go watch the movie Shawshank Redemption, which I believe is a true story, I can't really, stamp that right now, but Morgan Freeman and maybe about two or three other black people were the only black people in that prison. You know what I'm saying? It was we had like I said, we had a low to non-existent prison rate. Black people understood that, okay, look, we got Jim Crow laws against us, so we can't do this, but we gonna do what we can and we're gonna make the best of it. And also we're going to take our money and put it back into the community instead of going and give it to other people, right? And this is how you had things like Black Wall Street. The fact that we had something called Black Wall Street in the 20s and we don't have that now, but they have Little Italy, they have Chinatown. I mean, it's just asinine. It makes no sense. You got guys right now who just to throw a basketball, they're making $200 million. Just to throw a football, they're making $200 million. But you mean to tell me that black people don't have their own economic or their own economic system, or at least not so much of their own economic system? They're not at the economic totem pole in the top three. It's just asinine because we have everything that we need now. We can go to we can do anything now. There's no Jim Crow laws. We can go to any college and university. We have more degrees than a thermometer in our community. We have all of the influence. We have all of the capital. Why are we still at the bottom of the economic pole? I'll tell you why. Because it's two things that our brain it's two things that fills the black man and the black woman's brain, and that is I call it the Instagram effect, aka stunting, and social justice. So I'll address both of those things. Social justice is always woe to me because I'm black. Oh, I'm the first black this. Oh, it's because I'm black. This is a part of the CRTD, civil rights transmitted disease. That told you. Nobody told you this before that. You knew. Okay, they got Jim Crow laws. Nobody told you. Now you know. People didn't know. Oh man, it's a problem. Martin Luther King come tell them, hey, it's a problem. Hey, it's a problem. The white man, the white man, the white man. And he didn't have no plan. Only thing he think we just want to share this. We just want to have a drink. And the thing about that is you don't never want to force yourself on somebody because what happens then is you're not really fully welcome. See, the thing about that is people are going to, I don't care what nobody saying, I stand on this hill and I'll die on it. People were going to come together organically. This is why Abraham Lincoln freed the slave because he understood that, listen, man, you got some people enslaved. That's weakening the country. People need freedom in order for the country to be strengthened. And those type of things was going to continue to progress. And we were going to come together as a people naturally. When you have somebody forcing something, it just never was right. And it always had black people with the mindset of, oh man, something is really wrong. And everything started going downhill from there. That's when the fathers started leaving the home, and next thing you know, the '70s came with all kind of drugs, and '80s came with crack and gangster rap, and that was an atomic bomb from the community for the black community, and we haven't sucked back since. We haven't sucked back since. And anything we do in life, anything we want to try. I was talking to some guys the other day, and they were saying, well, there's no Black Wall Street right now because they know what white people will do, like they did the first time. And this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about. Victim mentality, constant. First of all, the white people didn't do nothing the first time. That's number one. But number two, even let's just say they did, and I'm about to address that briefly. But let's just say they did, right? Let's just say, for example, they did. Uh, what about now? Ain't nothing it's nothing you could tell me that you could take about 10 NBA players. That and I'm being nice because it's 15 players per team. Let's just say you take 10 NBA players, 10 um baseball players, 10 football players, and 5 rappers, and they all come together with their money. That's about 10, that's billions of dollars of capital and influence that can do a whole lot. Just what I just said. They could create a company. I'm talking about a corporation. It's nothing black people is doing today that means anything. Only thing, and again, because of that mindset of if I try, the white man gonna hold me back. That's that again, that social justice mindset. The other mindset is they so focused on stunt. They so focused on that's why I say black people got more degrees than the mama. They got Mercedes and BMWs like you ain't never seen before. They all got diamond teeth, diamond jewelry, this diamond that, veneer teeth. They traveling all over the world. Their passports look like subways in Harlem. They rocking all of the Gucci, Louis, you name it. They got all that. They look good, but they not doing good. Prior to the civil rights movement, we was doing good. We had a business mindset. We had the mindset that everybody else have today. Even the people that come to this country, they come to this country with two plans. It depends on if they come by themselves or if they come with a family. If they come with a family, it's already understood. Look, we are going to America to achieve the American dream, either through capitalism or education. And this is how our people was prior to the civil rights. Before the civil rights movement. Education, of course, we kept God first. Civil rights movement basically was a socialism movement. Depend on government to do something for you, not God. We depended on God first, that's number one, and we depended on capitalism and education. We would go get we would go be a doctor, come back to the neighborhood, and dealt with the people in the neighborhood. We didn't go be a doctor. Now we leaving our people and go and stay around another group of people. We had everything we needed in our neighborhood. The money circulated. We had businesses. All this went out of the window when Martin Luther King became, because now it was almost like Adam and Eve in the garden. They didn't know they was naked till they sinned. And so now you got this guy telling you, hey man, it's the white man doing it. So now everybody like, yeah, man, it's too not saying themselves, man, whoa. We doing what we doing, and what we doing is working for. I know a lot of people said to themselves, and then he even said that he knew what he did. He knew, but he was too late at that point. Because on like around it before his death, he said something along the lines. I'm paraphrasing. He said something along the lines of, "I'm afraid I brought my people into a burning building." Well, actually, you did. But so let's get down to this debate. This debate is moderated by Jason Whitlock. Jason Whitlock is a conservative sports journalist. Um, but this debate is between Delano Squeers and Chad O. Jackson. Chad O. Jackson is one of my friends. Um, he has a successful plumbing business. And I don't know what made him do it, but he don't have no, he don't have no degree, but he have a trade, he have his own business, and he's extremely smart. He's a historian and he's a documentarian. And he came out with two documentaries that if any black person watch will change their life. It helped change mine. Um, but these two documentaries are called Uncle Tom 1 and Uncle Tom 2. These two, and you can watch them on YouTube. These two documentaries will change any black person's life. But he recently came out with the MLK files, and he's breaking it down with CIA reports and all that there. So he's on the side of saying that, look, we need to get rid of this guy. His legacy is dead. Get rid of his day. And I stand with him in that because he didn't have a legacy. The mindset that we stuck in, and everybody else passing us up, the mindset that we stuck in, we traded that mindset that everybody else. But see, I tell people, America is not a white man's country. America is a strategic man's country. This is why people can come from overseas here and make millions of dollars. And most of the time, they come here with black people on their vision board. These Arabs, these Chinese, they have made generational wealth of the black woman and the black man because they know we like to look good. They know we like our nails, fake hair, designer, jewelry, everything we like. They come over here and they make up. They accommodate us with, and they even come here and get dealerships. You go in Houston, you go in LA, you go in Florida. It's a lot of Arabs who have dealerships with foreign cars on it. They deal with it. And they that $10,000, that $10,000 thing that they'll do all kind of Atlanta too. They'll do all kind of stuff behind closed doors with a black man because they know he will come by car after car after car. Right? So this degree this debate is between my boy Chad O. Jackson, again, successful plumber, a historian, a documentarian, who came up with Uncle Tom 1 and Uncle Tom 2, two documentaries that'll change any black person's life. And he's recently did the MLK files, which is he's breaking down everything about MLK. And this is another guy who um I like some of his work when it comes to he's a big proponent of fatherhood, two-parent households and families. He's a part of the Heritage Foundation. He's an educated brother. He's an educated brother. I can't really say what university he went to, but he's an educated brother. Um, and he's one of those black people who you're not about to take Martin Luther King from me. I don't care what he did. He did the right. You know what I'm saying? And I get it. I get it. And that's why I made this video to try to break it down. Because if I can get one, if I could light one candle, that candle might light 10. Most black people they ain't gonna take. They not gonna accept. You're not gonna get them. They have too much pride. And this with a lot of things. To tell them that they have to unlearn something they've been believing for 50, 20, 30, 10. years, it's just not going to happen, right? They have too much pride, and that's on them. But for the ones who want to know what's up, want to know why, want to understand things, you have to all. And when you trying to find a solution to a problem, everybody can see we have a problem. You don't see that, you stupid. I'm sorry, you're foolish. If you don't see it as a problem in the black community, you just slow. So when you try to find a solution to a problem, number one, you have to find the solution, but you also have to find what caused the problem, so you can make sure that this problem doesn't happen again. And for that reason, now this is why we have to abolish Martin Luther King's legacy and just let him rest in peace. Well, hopefully, and just just get because he didn't help us in any way, in any way. Um, and it sold us to the Democratic Party, and we have never been the same since. And so, without further ado, let's get into this. And I'm gonna cut my light off while he's talking. Of course, I'm gonna stop it to moderate. I'm gonna stop it to add commentary. But let's get started. And without further ado, I'm gonna cut the light off so you guys can see. And let's get it.
I still have a dream. And Chad's response is, well, of course you say that. He's a Marxist. In fact, he slept with two women who weren't his wife the night before he died. But one day, this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its dream. But the issue was never the issue. The issue is the revolution. That's part of what we do. We air our grievances. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty! We are free at last! Welcome to the Harmony Channel. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. Happy MLK Day to those who celebrate. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day across America. We wanted to have a special conversation about Dr. King's legacy because it is now being questioned. Is it a force for good, force for bad? Is it necessary? And so I've invited two guys familiar to my audience, Delano Squires and Chad O. Jackson, to have a conversation with me today about MLK, his legacy, his importance to American history. Was he a force for good? Was he a force for bad? Delano will argue the pro MLK side. Chad, who's got his own documentary on MLK, will argue the anti MLK side. But before we get into this debate, which I'm really looking forward to, I hope that you all enjoy it. I'm hoping that maybe there will be schools or young people that watch this discussion and learn from this discussion. But before, I'll let these guys introduce themselves, give you a little bit about their qualifications, why they're qualified to participate in this debate, and tell you a little bit about themselves. Delano, get us started. Time checking account in 2 minutes. We'll spot you up to $200. Started. Introduce yourself. Well, again, Delano Squires, been a long-time contributor to the Blaze. I have been writing on issues around race and culture for quite some time. Actually, I wrote a piece last year for the Blaze on MLK. Actually, I've written 2 pieces on MLK for the Blaze. And in addition to that, I write a fair amount about sort of the future of Black America. My focus is typically on the family, but I do see some linkages between what has gone on in the past and what lies in front of us in the future. So I'm excited about this. I'm looking forward to this debate and look forward to talking it up with Chad. Ronald, you just left out. You work for the Heritage Foundation. That is true. Sorry. I'm the director for the Center for Human Flourishing at the Heritage Foundation. Chad O. Jackson, a plumber and a historian.
Yeah. So I'm Chad Jackson, as Jason just mentioned. I am the owner of a plumbing company out of Dallas, Texas, also a documentary filmmaker. Right now we're doing a docuseries on MLK called the MLK Project. This topic is something that I've been researching for years. And in fact, the film company that I own and operate, Historia Revelata, basically seeks to go back into history and to really look at the facts of what we have on hand and to try to recontextualize it for um, the preservation of Western civilization, quite frankly. So I'm excited to get into this debate. I'm a huge admirer of Delano's work. He's a prolific writer on family issues. And so, yeah, I'm really ready to get into it.
Perfect. So we're going to start. There's going to be 5 different topics here. And I'm going to give each of these guys, because just quite frankly, these guys are long winded. I'm going to try to discipline them a little bit. But on each of these topics, I want to give them both 4 minutes to state their opinions, establish their positions, 4 minutes uninterrupted. I don't think this will be hard for these guys. I'll give them some time to think about it. And so each will take 4 minutes, and then I'll let them rebut each other for 2 minutes uninterrupted. And then we'll just have a back and forth conversation about the one of the 5 topics we're having. And so each of these 5 topics, we'll spend about 20 minutes on each of them. And so to get us started, Delano's going to go first. And so our opening question is, was Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement a force for good or a net negative for America in general and Black people in particular?
So, finery. They use luxurious, 100% pure mulberry silk. Use code Howie20 for 20% off.
My position is that MLK and the civil rights generation were a force for good, both for America and for Black people in general. I think it's important to contextualize the work that Dr. King and his associates did in the civil rights generation. And when I say contextualize, again, think of what life would have been like for a man in the 1960s, right? Probably the grandson, or at best, at worst, the great grandson of people who have been enslaved Black people in this particular country. And he comes along, and he's most known for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. But prior to that, between the end of the Civil War and 1964, there were, to my recollection, 5 different civil rights acts and 3 Reconstruction amendments. So there were several times throughout American history, again, post-Civil War, where the federal government said, we need to pass legislation to protect the rights of Black Americans. And clearly those things did not have the intended effect. So my position is what Dr. King did. And again, his peers in that generation was a force for good. I think one of the arguments is that, well, look at where the Black community is now and what people do. And I would say, to be fair, I believe Chad does this at times as well, is to say Black America is in a worse position now than it was in 1965 as it relates to several different measures. I say first and foremost being the family. And because of that, we believe that the Civil Rights Act was a mistake. How civil rights were delivered to Black Americans, the process has led to damage within Black America. And again, I reject that position. And I'll put it simply this way. If you are a Black person who wants to go to school where you want, to live where you want, to shop where you want, to marry who you want, then you owe some debt of gratitude to the generation that came before you.
I want to stop it right there for a second. First of all, that's a very weak stance because, again, as for mentioned, people were going to come together naturally. Let's just be honest about it. Like, you mean to tell me, like right now, that was about 60, 70 years ago. You think people wasn't eventually going to come? Because, again, it was already understood. And even, let's just say it would. Let's just say it wouldn't. Again, when he say a man in a black man in the 60s, this is where it comes from. This is where, and this is why I always tell people. And I've had these debates with educated people. It's really tough. It's really pointless. Because number one, if they educated and you not educated, they really not gonna even. No matter what you say. If you say the sky blue, they gonna try to. Well, it's blue, but it's only blue, and they gonna come with some stupid data. that tells you basically to not believe your eyes. This is what educated people do. So because he's educated versus Mr. Chad O. Jackson, who is an actual historian like myself, who actually did their own research, not the research that these scholastic institutions forced you to have, the history that they wanted to make pretty, the whitewash history. When I say whitewash, I don't mean the white man and nothing like that, because I'm not one of those people. But I'm saying like it was watered down. Let's just say that. And to make you see things as they wanted you to see it versus how they should be. And contrary to any belief, we can go do the number. When you talk about black on black crime, out of wedlock birth, marriages, incarceration rate. If you go all of the major things that's currently affecting black people, if you go before civil rights movement, none of these things was a problem. None of these things was a problem. We had more businesses. And again, I'm going to say it, Black Wall Street was in the 1920s. Of course, they told y'all that the white man was jealous, and it's just so many lies that they tell you at these scholastic institutions. If you don't do your own research because you somebody who believe, oh, they're not gonna lie to me, you'll be very misinformed. And what'll happen is you'll go around somebody like Mr. Chad Jackson or myself, and we'll embarrass you. Just like the slave thing. White people didn't just go to Africa with guns blazing. You Negroes get on the damn boat. That's not what happened. Our people in Africa sold us to the Arabs. The Arabs somehow had communication with the European that was over here in America, and they needed people to help them build America. Now, was slavery wrong and how we were treated once we got here? Absolutely. But they paid for us. They bought us. They bought us as employees from the Arabs. We were sold by our own people in Africa. That's what happened. It wasn't they just came over there, but in school, they'll have you believing that the white people came to Africa, jumped over a boat, and just rounded up Negroes, put them in the boat, get over, we going back. No, that's not what happened. And so, when you talk about this Jim Crow, Black Wall Street, you know, what happened was in 1921, it was a business deal. But just think about it. I want to add context to this, right? Because you got to have depth and context when you're speaking on these things. This happened in 1921. So just think how long Black Wall Street actually had been going on. And the beginning, probably the end of the 19th century. But this is the 20th century, the beginning of the 1900s. We actually had a Black Wall Street in 1921 is when the massacre happened. What happened was a white man and a black man came together. They was having a business deal because Black Wall Street was trying to expand. They had that kind of capital, right? The meeting turned out bad. They in a fight and a war broke out. And of course, it was more white people in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's how war works. That's how war anytime you have a war, power is the thing, and strength come in numbers. And they overpowered us, or overpowered those black people in that particular area, tore Black Wall Street. But guess what? This is what they don't tell you. And this is what the schools won't tell you. This is something that you will only know if you do your own research. That by 1925, Black Wall Street not only was rebuilt, it was rebuilt bigger and better. This with new fire hazards, this with new regulations. It was built back bigger and better. And so when we speak about these type of things, we have to understand that the school only teaches you, and this is the problem when you're dealing with people who are educated. When I seen this debate, I already knew who was going to win it because Chad is somebody who did the work. He didn't go in a scholastic institution and this is the professor. The professor gonna tell you the watered down version. You have to do your own research to learn the real version. But I'll let him continue. So when you say, well, that you got to go do your history, brother. We was doing way better prior to the civil rights movement and before the civil rights movement. Yeah, prior. Anything that's affecting us right now to this day, right, wasn't affecting us then. Only thing now is we got more degrees, more capital, more influence. But let's continue. Hold on, I can't see. I was supposed to cut the light on.
So that's my general position, and I think again this is consistent. The idea that there should be efforts to eradicate differences in treatment based on race is consistent both with our constitutional history and, history post 1776. Really quick, I just want to read a quick few lines.
You got a minute and 19.
Okay, a quick few lines from Justice Harlan. This is the dissent in Plessy versus Ferguson. He said, "In the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior, dominant ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens. In respect of civil rights, all citizens are equal before the law. The humblest is the peer of the most powerful. The arbitrary separation of citizens on the basis of race while they are on a public highway is a badge of servitude wholly inconsistent with the civil freedom and equality before the law established by the Constitution." This was in Plessy versus Ferguson. Brown versus Board of Ed overturned that particular decision. And again, he was the lone dissenter in Plessy. So I see King's work as a continuation of that thread from the Civil War, from the end of the Civil War through Reconstruction, that said, finally, we need laws in place that ensure that American citizens are no longer discriminated against based on race.
Taxes, chasing updates. Now taxes, turbo tax. Doing it all for the
Can't be giving these people free
Discriminated against based on race.
Ronald, good opening statement. And I do want to, before you go, I want to advise you, you can rebut what Delano says after you give your opening statement. So, opening statement doesn't have to be a direct rebuttal to what Delano said. So let me restate the question. We'll restart the clock here. Was Martin Luther King Jr. and the Civil Rights Movement a force for good or a net negative for America in general and Black people in particular?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the Civil Rights Movement and King were not a force for good. Really, what they were a force for federal expansion and the USSR propaganda. The USSR, the Soviet Union, literally called the Civil Rights Movement in America the strategic propaganda asset, because that's exactly what they were. When you look at King's organization, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, there was a direct line and an indirect line of communication between them and the Soviet Union. This goes back to the 1930s under the FDR administration, where you had the National Negro Congress, which was started by a commission out of the FDR administration, and Joseph Stalin himself. A. Philip Randolph was the leader of that organization. And by the time you get to the 1960s, he would hand the baton off to Martin Luther King. And so there has always been communist infiltration in the Civil Rights Movement, and it didn't change under Martin Luther King's leadership. I argue that this is a force for bad and is a detriment to Black Americans and to America at large, insofar that the communist ideology is antithetical to our way of life. It's antithetical to genuine success. I know Delano writes a lot about family values. He writes a lot about conventional methods and means to becoming successful. Communism is antithetical and downright hostile to those conventional means that my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents undertook to become successful. Whether you're talking about in rural Arkansas, whether you're talking about in rural Oklahoma, where my folks are from, or in Texas, where I live now. When you look at this notion of what Marxism breeds in terms of exploiting grievances, as Thomas Sowell documents, as well as the late Walter E. Williams and other scholars, you saw this kind of upward mobility, this upward trajectory on the part of colored people from the 19th century well into the 1940s and 50s. And then as this kind of cultural Marxist rhetoric, this kind of feel sorry for me grievance rhetoric began to take off with the help of the press on the part of the civil rights activists, you saw this spirit of embitterness really enter colored culture, what we now call Black culture. And that has had an adverse effect on, again, not only Black culture, but also the larger American society. And I'll end by saying this. When you look at the late Nikki Giovanni, who was a poet, a radical Marxist feminist, She said in an interview with James Baldwin that Black folks in America, she acknowledges Black folks in America have always been successful and have always had businesses. People can look this up on YouTube right now. Uh, she said that, however, my generation, we were not good business people. We were good civil rights people. We decided to become activists. And when you look at the fact that from around her that time to today, you see this kind of widening of the disparities, gaps, and so on and so forth. And you see this kind of embracing this bitterness and the spirit of entitlement that we now have. And you look at what King was saying in the 1960s, along with people like James Baldwin and others, they were really instilling the spirit of bitterness. And this was part of the kind of Soviet propaganda program that they were implementing. And so, no, it was a complete detriment to the larger American society.
Good. Delano, we'll restart the clock in 2 minutes. Delano, go ahead with your rebuttal.
So I find it interesting when you asked Chad whether MLK was a force for good. One of his first moves was to talk about the civil rights sort of era with respect to federal expansion. And I'm not surprised because I've consumed a fair amount of Chad's work, not all of it. I mean, so Chad is a prolific documentarian, and I give him credit for that. But at times it seems as if Chad seems to believe that government becomes more moral the closer it gets to the people. So for him, and again, Chad, you will correct me if I'm wrong. What I'm hearing is the federal expansion, federal overreach from his perspective, is really the main sin here. And I would counter that by asking pointedly whether Chad believes that, let's say in 1965, 64, 55, that separate spaces, right? Basically, should Black folks have been continued to be subjected to separate public accommodations, separate entrances, whether it's water fountains, restaurants, restrictive housing covenants, anti-miscegenation laws. Chad, is your perspective that those things should have stayed in place until such time when the populace within a particular state said, we are ready to no longer discriminate against our Black citizens in the ways that we have been doing? Is that your position?
I'll articulate my position in a more elaborate way when I get a chance. I don't know if I can answer that in a simple yes or no. But with a gun in my head, I would say yes, because that's in keeping with what Booker T. Washington laid out, and that was actually yielding the fruit that it was desired to yield.
Not all F words are bad. Some are great, like fast, free, fiber. Switch to optimum fiber-powered internet for as low as 20.
Laid out, and that was actually yielding the fruit that it was desired to yield.
So we can come back to that in the back and forth aspect of this. Delano, if you got 20, 30 more seconds, if you had anything else you wanted to rebut, or we can. No, we can go to chat.
It looks like he just wants to move right into the.
No, you got your time.
Which is fine.
Reclaim your time.
Restart the clock 2 minutes, and you can rebut what you heard from Delano.
So one of the things that Delano brought up in his opening statements, which was he brought up what life was like, and with all due respect, this is one of the things that the left often does, which is they really kind of lean into the art of storytelling and imagine yourself as a Black man in the 1930s or what have you, so as to really kind of
Absolutely.
this notion or this narrative that the conditions were such that there needed to be drastic, radical change. But the thing about it is, when you look at the rhetoric of revolution that a lot of the civil rights activists and the other social justice activists were really pushing in those days, this idea of revolution, a lot of it was the exacerbation, the exaggeration, the exploitation of grievances. This is part of the kind of Marxist framework. We try to find a grievance, we exploit it to the hills, and we try to get people riled up enough to where they then will take to the streets. It will cause unrest. It will cause this kind of destabilization phase. And out of that destabilization, people will cry out for the federal government to come in and do something about it. When you read Risa Galliabuff's book, she's a professor out of Virginia Law School. She wrote a book called The Lost Promise of Civil Rights. And she's not ideologically on my side. She's a leftist. But she even makes the point that the civil rights division of the Justice Department was built for the purpose of government expansion, which goes back to the question that you had about um, is it my view that the closer you get to the people, the more moral the government is? In a sense, yes. Because the fact of the matter is, we are a country made up of diverse people with diverse backgrounds and diverse beliefs. And this is why I would side more with the anti-federalists, Patrick Henry, Robert Yates, Luther Martin, and others, that believe that to the extent that you try to have this big, overarching, strong federal power that's centralized, you're going to have the kind of resentment, the kind of unrest, and all the things that breed from that because we are so diverse. So you need to have it kind of condensed down as much as you possibly can to make it close to people.
At this point, it's on you all. You got, go back and forth. You got questions you want to ask or whatever. Do it now. We can go 10, 15 minutes. Knock yourself out.
So where Chad started there was, I almost fell out of my. Chad said that I was engaging in the art of storytelling. I would wager Chad has at least 100 hours of storytelling as it relates to MLK and the civil rights movement. And one of the things and I've said this publicly, so I can say it here.
No. You're wrong, Mr. Delano. Chad is not into storytelling. Chad is into fact telling with content. I mean, context, documents, all kinds of stuff. And these MLK files, he has CIA documents. Of course, the MLK file that was released recently. I mean, it's a different when you telling a storytelling and you're trying to make it like something was worse than it actually was. Not saying I don't want to take, and I don't want to try to, try to take no suffering out of what people went through in that time, saying, "Oh, you couldn't go drink here, you couldn't eat there." I mean, living in a free world and having an experience that may have not been the best thing, but when you speak on, "Oh man, we were just making it what it wasn't," like we was just suffering, and oh my God, no, that's not what it was. We understood we couldn't eat there, so what we did was open our own restaurant up and kept the black dollars with black people. That was the only difference. I tell people all the time, you'll see, it's so funny for me. Matter of fact, I got videos on my channel about that. I remember, I want to say about a year ago in my hometown, they got a real popular a seafood restaurant, and it was a situation where a lady went there. Well, it was a few adults, some parents went there with a baseball team. So it was a whole bunch of them. I think it was around 13, 14 years old. They were old enough to know right from wrong. But again, we all been 14 or 15 after a victory, playing sports and going into a restaurant, and we kind of might be a little loud. We are still children at that age. We understand right from wrong, but I digress. So they went in there, and it's not no hood store. It's not no 5-star restaurant, but it's not a hood thing either. So you got other people in there, and people were complaining about, "Hey man, it's a little wild." And so the owner, who was a white man, he asked them, um, and I believe he asked them more than one time. And so they automatically just got upset and took their phones out and made it about race. And you see this happen all over. And again, excuse me, this is a symptom of the CRTD, the Civil Rights Transmitted Disease, because they didn't do that back then. We know how we not only we gonna get treated bad, we go there, we're not even welcome there. So we're gonna do is build our own. And so if we had that mindset still, not to be in that mindset of rulership instead of this silliness of equality, which was basically what the civil rights movement was about, which is stupid in itself, because people who are in power, the people who are in power, the people who are coming in power, why would they give you equality? I mean, just why would they do that? Like, oh well, you know what? That's just not going to happen. You have to fight for equality, and we living in a time now where it doesn't have to be a war, it doesn't have to be a civil war, it doesn't have to be nothing like that. All we got to do is begin to spend our black dollars with us and use our influence and use our capital to build things that people can use, even all races, like white people. They built everything. They created the internet. They create Tesla, vehicles, airplanes. The white people have created everything that everybody in the world uses. And what happens is people adapt to that. People invest in that, and everybody makes money off of it for their community. That's called community generational wealth, right? And so this is what we need to be doing, but we're not doing it. And instead of getting on here crying about how these people treated you at the place, look, check this out. We not going here no more. And if you want to, which the man wasn't wrong for what he did. All he did was ask y'all, look, man, y'all gonna have to calm down. I ask y'all to leave. I have other customers here. I understand y'all got children. Y'all need to get them in order. And they should have told the kid, hey, man, calm down. I'm not telling y'all have to shut up, but just calm down. We are in a restaurant. But again, this goes back to whole training. And the father needs to be in the home. Because I remember, man, coming up, man, with my father, everywhere we would go, everywhere, we had a pep talk before we got out of that vehicle. Hey, look, we going here, whether it was somebody's house, whether it was a water park, a theme, wherever we was going, we had a pep talk by our father. Look, don't be doing this. Don't be doing this. Have manners. And I'm not saying that women don't do that to their children, but it's just a different level of respect and disciplinary that comes from the father being around. So it is these women telling them, stop, stop, they're not listening. Um, and you know, like I say, the man had to continue to tell them. And I don't know if I don't really remember if he actually leave or they just said, you know, we're gonna leave because he being racist. Because remember, anytime a white person say anything to a black person that they don't like, it's automatically racist. Again, this is a symptom from the CRTD, civil rights transmitted disease, right? So if y'all so worried about it, it's happening every day. The white man, y'all on social media, on the white man's cell phone, on the white man internet, blaming him for everything. Why don't y'all create your own airports? Why don't y'all create your own cruise line? Why don't y'all create your own and y'all won't have to deal with that? But y'all can't create your own because y'all no longer have that mindset now. Y'all mindset, every dollar y'all get gotta go into traveling, gotta go into making yourself look good, or gotta go into make or go into making yourself look rich so you can stun on other people who look like you because y'all know better than to do that around these other races because we can't compete with them at this present time. But I'm gonna digress on that situation. I'm gonna calm that down and let him finish. But I just wanted to say that for what he said. But let's continue.
Is that um, when I consume Chad's work, I notice the use oftentimes of adjectives where I think verbs should be. One of the favorites is nefarious, right? So instead of saying this person said this or this person did that, what Chad would say is, oh, this particular act, the law was passed under nefarious circumstances. That's the art of storytelling. Chad in his opener talked about how black people lived in the South, and I've heard him talk about there was more harmony between blacks and whites in the South than people want to give credit to. And that might be the case in some places, in some locales. But the notion that storytelling is sort of the exclusive province of the left is something that I mean, that's come on now, we can't say that. So that was one small point. But again, I would ask Chad, do you think that a black man who wanted to shop in a particular retailer and was told you cannot shop here because you are a black man had a legitimate grievance, let's say in the year 1955?
No,
Okay,
because we have freedom of association.
okay.
And if a white store owner don't want you shopping in their store, I believe it's their right to not allow you to shop in their store.
Absolutely.
On the contrary, if you're a
Absolutely.
black man on the store and don't want white people coming in, that's perfectly right. Doesn't make it right, but it is your freedom of association. And so I believe that matters such as that should be handled in the marketplace.
I tell this to people all the time. I tell this to people all the time. Like y'all have to stop going into black people will go into other people's business and try to bully them. Listen, man, whether you go and get some, it doesn't matter what type of food you go and get, what type of grocery store you're going in, which is that's a different situation because a grocery store is owned by a corporation, not a person. Listen, man, you have to be moving in this world with a purpose. Now, if something is just openly racist and you catch it on camera and you feel like you want to litigate it, that's on you and that's your thing. But just because somebody treats you a certain way, who cares? This is not high school. So this is my freedom. If I gotta, because it seems fine when black people do it. It seems fine when black people say this is a black owned college. I mean, this is a predominant black college. It seems fine when we have a store that say black owned. All is fine. See, this is the thing, and again, everything on this channel is pro truth, pro Christ. And we know in scripture tell us that God is against unbalanced scales. God is about fairness. So if we can do it, why can't they do it? Oh, because slavery and Jim Crow. Listen, man, that's the bad. You gotta forgive. If you don't want to forgive the white man for what he did, your people. And this is another funny thing I gotta say. I just gotta say this. Because black people are just so disingenuous. They seem to get up in arms and so upset about what happened to their ancestors and slavery and all this here who they never met or don't know. But they can have a family member right now that's alive, living and breathing that don't agree with them politically, don't agree with them, or quote unquote not on their level educational wise, or just any little simple thing, and they'll cut you off like it ain't nothing. But they just so hurt and care about that. That's bullshit. They'll just go ahead on and cut and dry and say that's BS, right? And so, like I say, like he say, if a black person do it, it should be cool, and if a white person do it, that's nobody who cares. Who cares? Okay, you don't want me here. I'm moving with a purpose. Goodbye, sir. When I'm again, like I say, we know that the Jim Crow laws are no longer. But I mean, my thing is this. Now I could see if it was a situation where it was like this, the only grocery store in town, and that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. It was just certain ones with white people who was racist or who had bought into that. So that's how they was raised. And hey, listen, man, I don't want you here. You're black. Goodbye. All right, dude. So I'm gonna go to my homeboy grocery store because he got a grocery store. Because that's how we were coming back then. But this whole victim, oh, I'm so sick. Who cares? Who cares? Nobody cares. Like he said, whether it's right or wrong, it might not be right. I don't really think it's that bad. If I don't want nobody to come here, hey, I remember it's a funny thing, kind of the different. I remember Lori Lightfoot was the mayor of Chicago when she was saying that one time, I'll never forget, she did a press conference and she said, I'm only and it was what she didn't hide it because she didn't even have to say it. She could have did it without saying it. She said, I'm only answering a question from black reporters. Well, don't you know if a white person would have said that? But it's okay because she's a black and she's a woman and she was gay. So she got 3 infinity stones of wokeness. So we know how that go. But I'm just saying though, bro. I'm just saying right now, half of the time you Negroes right now living in segregation. Y'all don't want the white men around. What you doing over here? You can't wear this hairstyle and all this nonsense. But like, come on, man. But let's continue.
I don't believe that we should cede to the government the right to force people to serve those whom they don't want to serve or hire whom they don't want to hire or not be able to fire people for certain reasons that they find to be fitting. And so yes, this idea that it is a legitimate grievance that a black man who was denied uh, the transaction of buying a sandwich should now go to the government and have the government calm down and put a gun to the person's head to serve me. I don't believe in that level of coercion by any stretch of the imagination. I do, however, believe in desegregation. In other words, I don't believe that there should be laws on the books where the state is forcing segregation. And so, to that extent, I do believe that those laws should be done away with. And those laws were being done away with. I mean, whether you're talking about, from the turn of the 20th century into the middle part of the 20th century, you did see some of these laws being repealed and giving credit where credit is due. The NAACP were taking some of these cases to court, and they were having victories in the courts. But then a lot of it too was through people coming together on the ground level, having nothing to do with the government at all. These were what we call interracial commissions, where responsible Negro and white leaders were working out their differences, working out their issues, without it ever getting to the courts or getting to the legislature or what have you. And so this is what we call the reformative process. With the reformative process, you have a character building component in it because it takes hard work. But once you achieve whatever it is you seek to achieve through that reformative process, it is sustainable insofar that it requires character in order to be maintained. However, when you have the revolutionary process, it's quick, sudden uprising that exploits grievances, that sows discord, that creates agitation in the streets, such to where, again, people cry out for federal legislation and quick, fast, and in a hurry right now, to the extent that the new social norm is predicated not on character, but rather law and law alone. That is going to, I mean, first of all, it's artificial, but then two, that new norm that you have will self implode. It's only a matter of time. And when you look at the Niquentas type, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but when you look at the Niquentas types and you look at this kind of contingent that are now rising up as the pendulum swings from the civil rights industry, that's not sustainable. And it doesn't. Anyway, I've been rambling. Go ahead.
So I want to ask two questions to sort of bracket what I understand to be your governing philosophies in two periods of time. You talk, excuse me, you used the word revolution. You talked about how, sort of revolutionary change is not sustainable. Would you apply that to the American founding as well?
Well, that's actually a tough question because the difference is you did have a foreign entity that was governing us from afar. Okay. And here you've already had a long established culture that has existed for a long period of time. And I would say that it's different than the kind of subversive kind of agitation that we saw with communist revolution.
I mean, there was certainly agitation. There was certainly violence in the streets. There were a list of grievances.
Correct. Yeah, there were grievances, yeah. But again, the way that communism disseminates through deceptive, subversive means is altogether different than what Thomas Jefferson, for example, was doing in terms of really laying out and airing out the grievances. And of course, if you're talking about like the Boston Tea Party, if you're talking about things like that, where they dressed up in Indian garb and things like that, and they were kind of moving deceptively, point taken, point very well taken. But I tend to see I tend to see what we're doing during the so-called Revolutionary War and the spread of communism as two completely different things.
But I think part of that is because you are reaching a conclusion, and that's fair for you because you'll say, look, I've done the historical research and I reached this conclusion. But I think you're reaching a conclusion where an argument should be, because your entire characterization of the civil rights era is basically this was communist and therefore it was negative, right? So it's either, and I mean, we're human beings, so sometimes you can have tension within your principles. But when I hear you say, revolutions are not sustainable forms of social change, agitation, violence in the street, and then you say, well, the American founding, sure, we had our own culture. The government who was ruling us was far away. I mean, Black folk will say, look, we had our own culture for hundreds of years. The people who are ruling over us may be near, but we have similar grievances, right? We don't have representation. I was watching a video with you last night, actually, and it sounded like you were making an argument against enfranchising free Black males post-Civil War. You correct me if that argument was wrong, if I'm mischaracterizing it. So it seems as if there's some tension in your principles, and I'm just trying to understand that. The War for Independence, the American founding was one point. Second point, again, this is more contemporary. Would you then, just given what you said about the ability of private enterprises to serve whom they want, to hire whom they want, would you then be in favor of, let's say, what conservatives characterize as DEI policies, where companies say we're going to favor Black, Hispanic, LGBT, women, whatever, non-white males in hiring and promotion over white males? Would you be in favor of that? And do you think federal or state law that prohibits that, would you characterize those as federal overreaches or government overreach?
I want to try to reframe your question to understand it better.
Okay.
So are you asking, is it okay for a private organization, entity, school, company to have DEI policies? Is that what you're asking?
No, I want to put a finer point on it. When I say DEI, because people mean different things when they string those three letters together. I'm talking specifically. If Coca-Cola in 1954 said we're not hiring Negroes, if we have Negroes, they bring the sodas into the restaurant and then they go on about their business. It sounds like your position would be Coca-Cola has a right to do that. If Coca-Cola in 2026 says we're not hiring any more white dudes, to the extent that we have white dudes in this company, they will no longer get promotions. And when we have internal meetings, the people of color go in one room and the white people go in another room. I'm asking, would you be okay with that?
Constitutionally speaking, it's their right. Coca-Cola has a right to do what Coca-Cola wants to do. Because I might not like it. My neighbor might not like it.
You know why? Because Coca-Cola built their business up. So yes, they can do that. Right now today, they can do that. McDonald's, these big, huge corporations, they can do that, and they would still win. They wouldn't lose a quarter. Of course, you would have some white liberals, plenty of Negroes whining and crying. Oh, we not hiring no more black people. We're not hiring no more Mexican people, whatever. They would say, oh, but guess what? They can do that. And they got the capital to cover themselves and everything. This is what people don't understand. This goes back to that civil rights disease. Listen, man, people can do what they want when they build their own. That's why you blacks need to build y'all own and stop trying to bully other people with theirs. Y'all got everything y'all need. The time is now.
I have nothing to do with Coca-Cola. I didn't put in the blood, sweat, and tears to build Coca-Cola.
Exactly.
Therefore, what my opinion is, whether as a voter or just as a man on the street, it have no bearing over, on what they do. So, I mean, I don't know about the legalities over, the difference between publicly traded companies versus private, like legitimately private companies.
Right.
But even to the extent that there is a difference, I do believe that in many ways, a lot of what is done in this country is a complete betrayal, if you will, of our genuine constitutional principles. And so, speaking in terms of constitutional intent and the freedom of association, I don't believe, I do believe that Coca-Cola should have a right to run their business, how they wish to run their business, and the decision as to whether they will stay in business or how well they'll do as a business should be left to the free market.
So then let's say the conservative activists, and I'm asking these questions because again, I'm making parallels and also I'm trying to true up the scales because I want to understand sort of the principles that undergird your argument. So conservative activists would say this is anti-white discrimination and this should be eliminated using the force of law. You would say would you characterize those people as agitators in the same way you would, sort of 1960s or civil rights protesters or
to my family. Their assessment of 7 people between myself and $28 billion.
Another thing, look at a freaking mirror. It sounds crazy.
Protesters or
Yeah, I mean, I do that all the time.
okay.
And this is why, again, I don't really have a political home. I'm neither a Republican or a Democrat because I believe in the true intent and the true edicts of the Constitution. If up to me, we would even go back before the Constitution to the Confederation of States, quite frankly. But I don't believe in this kind of, I don't like this thing happening in society. Let us run to the government and have them do something about it. I don't like that because to the extent that you do that, it becomes this ever expanding thing.
Right.
And again,
communism.
You can't do that when you have a country so large as ours, so diverse as ours. I mean, Texas is not the same as Tennessee. It's not the same as Georgia. It's not the same as New York. We are so, and even within states, you have different towns and different cities and different counties. You have rural areas and metropolitan areas. We're so different. And so to have this kind of, I don't like this, let us now take it to the courts, let us now take it to the feds and have them do something about it. We seek safety and security in big government, and that's the part that I don't like. And so whether it's Republicans doing it or whether it's Democrats doing it, I don't like it either way. But what I am saying though is that when you look at the civil rights movement, when you look at a lot of the social justice movements over the course of the 20th century, they were doing it better than anyone. Insofar that their kind of brain trust, the puppeteers, if you will, who are pulling the strings. These are people who have and I made this point on Jason's show. These are people who studied the soft sciences, who studied the social sciences, who studied human behavior and group behavior, and they're using it to their advantage. I mean, when you look at, for example, in the USSR and how they were developing these ideas and developing these means of population control and controlling public opinion, so on and so forth. Where you look at the fact that they wanted to imperialize their ideology throughout the world through the domino effect, um, and wanted to do so in a way that doesn't really require having to pick up a gun against the nation. They did it through implosion. They did it through infiltration and subversion, and they were having success all over the world. The problem in the United States is that you had, by and large, a kind of church-going people, especially in the South. Negroes were heavily church-going, as you all know. And so this created a kind of captive audience. In the 1930s, of course, you had the Communist Party resolve to infiltrate the church. And so whether you're talking about Earl Browder's outstretched hand, whether you're talking about the work of Bella Dodd, of course, she would do it through the teachers' unions, but she writes about how the communists were infiltrating Protestant and Catholic seminaries and churches in order to blur the lines between Christianity and communism. And we know as Christians that we are not to participate in darkness, but we're to expose darkness. And so nobody did this better than Martin Luther King in terms of blurring the lines. And I don't know if we're going to get into this later in the debate, but the fact of the matter is, with the help of the press and with the kind of instructions of his handlers, King was able to, in a sense, he was able to, what's the word I want to use here? He was able to kind of collectivize the people through charisma and through his kind of charm and through his oratory and through his speeches, which sounded like one thing, but if you go back and listen to those speeches and you know what you're listening to, you're going to hear something completely different. And what this did is it kind of knocked us off our square, as it were, and it caused particularly the young Black radicals who were deviating from the kind of trajectory laid forth for them by their parents and grandparents. What it did was it kind of caused a lot of people to adopt this mentality that the way to be successful is through agitative means, is through revolution. And as a result of this, you saw this kind of downward trajectory.
Go ahead. Last one. We got to move on. It's interesting because on one hand, you will point to government overreach as the problem, right? But then on the other hand, you say, well, no, it's sort of collective action. And my thing is, prior to 1964, if King and other leaders are saying, look, there's certain things where there's unequal treatment based on race, and we want to mobilize people to change these things, right? And you would say this is on account of their handlers. I will stipulate I'm not the historian that you are, Chad, right? I do think it's interesting though, because I feel at times you use Marxism the way the left uses racism, which is to say around every corner and underneath every sheet. Oh no, but that's that'll be my characterization. But that's fine, right?
But it is.
I want to jump in there. Hold on, I want to jump in here, and I want to do this rarely though. But Marxism is antithetical to Christianity, and I do believe it's an evil, and it's a tool of Satan. And I do believe Satan is in control of the world. And so I don't think it's a conspiracy theory to think, oh, Marxism and that ideology is around every corner, because that's Satan. And so it's like when I'm listening to this debate, and again, I'm hearing Chad on a completely different level. I've had conversations, had you on, but you're cutting, Delano's forcing you to go a cut deeper, and it's like,
Not have to buy 1,000 rings. And each way to get us to we'll print them in 2 days and ship them for
I'm not, but I'm just telling you my real reaction. I'm sorry for jumping in here, but it's like, this man is sitting over it. Nope, God is my sole provider. Period.
End of story. And we've been hoodwinked by MLK and all this other stuff. Like, no, the government is an equal or superior provider for you in this life than God. And it's like, this is this discussion and what you're bringing out of text, very fascinating to me. But I will say, like, when I hear people like Marxism, the devil, Satan, things trying to move you away from God being your sole provider, it is around every corner. That's not a conspiracy theory.
Exactly.
In my view.
Thank you.
Well, obviously I would make the argument that, and not let me not use the word racism because it's so loaded, but I would argue that partiality, I'll use a biblical term, based on ethnicity is also a sin. Now we can debate which one is a greater sin. What I would certainly argue is that in this country, Marxism is the enemy at the door, and racism is the monster under the bed. We're not Cuba. We haven't had Fidel Castro for 40 plus years. So the idea that, oh no, hold on, I just want to follow you through here. And you said racism is under the bed, you get partiality, is what you learned. Correct. Ethnic partiality is inside the house array. It's not something that has to be fought off from the outside, right? So I just I wanted, well, let me finish the point that I was gonna make, which is I get your point about government overreach, but a charismatic leader galvanizing people who want to follow him, because you can only be a leader if you have people following you, to change hearts and minds. How is that also evil? Because that's how social movements work. Whether that's the fight against abortion, or whether that'll be a fight to reestablish traditional marriage. It's always somebody leading something with the intention of changing hearts and minds. So I don't understand if it's not tied directly to government overreach, why what King and his cohorts were doing you would see as necessarily negative and
I'm trying to answer the question as briefly as I possibly can to move on. But what I recommend people do, and I think I mentioned this on Jason's show before, so pardon me if I'm being redundant here, but what I recommend people do is go and read a book by Walter Lippmann, written in 1921, 1922, called A Public Opinion. And in it, he lays out exactly what King would later do when it comes to galvanizing the public. Because that's the thing, in a democracy or in a constitutional republic, the way that you have social change is through social movements, right? It's not like a monarchy or a dictatorship where a king or dictator are able to move unilaterally. You have to have the kind of the illusion of choice, right? And to the extent that people show up to the polls and they pull the lever for this politician or that politician or this proposition or that proposition, oftentimes they're going into that voting booth with information that has been packed into their heads, either organically or artificially. And so understanding the social engineers, those who really kind of dedicate their lives to the studying of the soft sciences and who commit their lives to academia, or even in going a more nefarious route to change and to move society in the way they wish it to go, they are heavily involved in social activism and creating kind of unrest and all the things. And so what Walter Lippmann writes about, he says that if a leader wishes to push a policy of campaign, the way to do it is for an orator to appeal to the masses, either through tempting agreements, by appealing to their patriotic sensibilities or their religious sensibilities. And to the extent that an orator is able to do that well, the masses will move in towards him and demand a policy of campaign. And that policy of campaign doesn't always have to coincide with the rhetoric that they use in the inception. It can be completely detached from it, such as the case when it comes to Martin Luther King. When you look at the I Have a Dream speech, for example, and he's talking about, I have a dream that one day, my 4 little children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. It seems like what he's offering is a meritocratic view, a meritocratic vision that everybody can get behind. Who can deny that? But the reality of it is, if you go back and you actually listen to that speech, because Donna, you and I, we've heard this speech growing up in school every year. I've heard it twice a year. Once during, in the weekend going into the Martin Luther King Day, but then to you here in February during Black History Month.
Probably know this is print for business cards, but did you know we print everything you need to brand your business? We print banners and signs that help you stand out. You must have merch like book bags, t-shirts, and hoodies. Right now, new customers can get 20% off with code Pt.1 because if you need it, we print it at Pt.1.com.
And even though we've heard the speech, we've never actually heard the speech, right? He's saying that that if America thinks that the Negro will go back to business as usual after the summer of 1963, where we saw a number of riots, then you're in for a rude awakening. He says that the whirlwinds of revolt will continue to rock this nation until the Negro gets his due justice. So he's using this very threatening language, and he's kind of talking out of both sides of his mouth. And he says that the Negro will never be free until justice rolls down like waters. He's using all this language, and he's using this kind of open-ended fallacy. And he says, one day we'll be free at last. Free at last, thank God Almighty, we'll be free at last, right? So he delivers a speech. It becomes an instant classic. And right before he dies, he gives what's called the mountaintop speech. And he's talking about the promised land. Again, this coincides with I Have a Dream speech. And he says, one day we'll get there. I may not get there with you, but we as a people will get to the promised land. The promised land that he's referring to is socialism, is Marxism.
You say that based on what?
I'm saying that based on his own papers, his own writings. I mean, he wrote to Coretta Scott while they were in college that he envisioned a day where there will be a nationalization of industry, and he's writing about all these different things that are quintessentially Marxist. Now he says that he isn't a Marxist, but you have to understand that he was going to school at the time.
I'm gonna put a pause on that. I'm gonna put you're talking next, and we're moving to a different topic that leads right into what you're talking about.
Okay.
And so the question is, was MLK Jr. a socialist, a Marxist, or just a critic of the ills of capitalism?
He was an avowed, well, not avowed. Let me not say that. He was a sneaky Marxist. Let me just say it that way. People have to understand, if you are looking for Martin Luther King to say in writing or out of his own mouth, I am a communist, you'll be hard pressed to find that. And so it seems to me, Delano, with all due respect, that that's exactly what you're looking for. And I say that because I've seen some of the things that you have, some of the things that you wrote for The Blaze. I've seen some of your tweets, and it seems like that's what you're looking for. You're looking for King saying out of his mouth, I'm a Marxist or I'm a communist. But the reality of it is we were dealing with a Cold War. We were dealing with a war of ideas where the American people, by and large, were antithetical to communism. You can't just come out and say you're a communist and think that you're going to have any kind of success. And so what they did, King in particular, he went to a school called Crozer Theological Seminary, which was overrun by communist professors. And what's interesting is that by the time
That here in Tennessee?
Yes. Well, no, that was in Pennsylvania. Crozer Theological Seminary was in Pennsylvania. He would later go to a communist training school in Tennessee called Highlander Folk School. Yeah. But King, he went to the school. It was overrun by these professors who were teaching the social gospel, which is a counterfeit gospel. That is to say, it's not the gospel at all. That was popularized by Walter Rauschenbusch in the late 1900s. What's interesting about this is it was a strategic move to get into the churches and to teach congregants something that's not the gospel at all, but something that uses Christianese, uses language that sounds very Christian in nature, but what it's preaching and teaching is something completely different. It's teaching, in essence, that God didn't come to save sinners, but rather that God came to save society from capitalism and from exploitation and all the things. So that's essentially what it is. You'll notice that every time King preached a sermon, he wasn't actually calling people to repentance. He was talking about, he was talking about basically the tenets of the social gospel. So he would learn about not only the social gospel, but also the Hegelian dialectic. In a sense, King was taught to basically mask his communist sensibilities behind the social gospel. And he would say things like, "This is the gospel that I will preach to the world," referring to the Hegelian, referring to the nationalization of industry, radical redistribution of wealth, a guaranteed annual income, which was all kind of part of this.
Are you sure your tax expert is right for you? Switch to TurboTax Full Service. You'll be matched with a TurboTax expert and get real-time updates on their progress, and you get your best outcome guaranteed. Switch to TurboTax Full Service.
This I want to say Hegelian, but I guess what I mean to say is this Fabian kind of incremental march through the institutions. That's what King envisioned, and that's what he set out to implement. And he would implement it with success. He partnered with Bayard Rustin, who was a active member of the Communist Party, who worked with the Young Communist League. It seems like I'm going fast, so I'm trying to cram all this into whatever time I have left.
We'll have
But
plenty
he,
after.
but he worked with also Stanley Levison, who was a financier for the Communist Party. These were his handlers. These are the ones, Stanley Levison in particular, would give King directives like, hey, go to Ghana to celebrate the independence of Kwame Nkrumah, who was a new leader of the dictator of Ghana. He would send him to various churches throughout the country, really pushing and teaching this message, trying to galvanize people, trying to collectivize people for the movement, which most folks were completely unaware that it was in fact a communist plot.
Chad will pause here. Delano, I will remind you on this part, just want you to answer the question, not directly rebut Chad or use Chad as a rebuttal. Was MLK Jr. a socialist, a Marxist, or just a critic of the ills of capitalism?
At the very least, he was the last one, which is a critic of the ills of capitalism. And again, just for context, in King's day in the South, the median occupation for a Black woman was a domestic. In 1959, the Black poverty rate, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, was about 40%, right? So, yes, was there a growing and burgeoning Black middle class? Absolutely. There have been, Black dentists and doctors and debutantes and people on Martha's Vineyard for a long time. That wasn't sort of the overall condition of Black Americans, certainly not in parts of the South. But for me, it's important. If you're going to ask me about someone's ideology, right? One, I think we should define terms. So, really quick, when I think, and I won't go through sort of the long dictionary definition of Marxism. I'll just give a couple of markers of things that typically characterize, a Marxist. Class struggle, classless societies, abolition of family, rejection of religion, revolution of the elites, revolution of the working class, obviously the proletariat against the elites, the bourgeoisie. Socialists, again, these slight variants, same family, but socialists oftentimes concerned about inequality, large social safety net and spending, and services for public benefit. The idea that someone who's critical of capitalism in the 1960s, right, who's concerned about income inequality and who advocates for a universal basic income, the idea that those things in and of themselves make you a communist or Marxist is one that I think is hard for anyone to sustain. Milton Friedman, the noted libertarian economist, was in favor of UBI. Now he also wanted to shrink much of the welfare state, but he was in favor of UBI. Tucker Carlson, I remember this distinctly. This was several years ago, one of his opening monologues at the top of the new year, when Tucker Carlson talked about some of the issues that face inner city majority Black neighborhoods, also face sort of rural majority white neighborhoods, and he criticized the type of crony capitalism that people like Mitt Romney advocated for. So you can find people, and then I mean, conservative media is rife with politicians, pundits who will talk about how the elites sort of jam up the working class, jam up the everyday man. So you'll hear, particularly nowadays, it's young couples can't afford to buy a home. The cost of healthcare, of childcare, of everything is going up, and this is part of the reason why you have this sort of popular sentiment on the right. But I think what ends up happening is the shadows say, no, these few things that I find that King did, right? His critiques of capitalism and so on and so forth. Though that's the evidence I use to charge and convict him of Marxism. And I just reject that. Not because of King, not because I'm a King defender, but because I have certain principles. And one of those is when you bring a charge against a man, you need evidence. Evidence is not speculation, it's not hearsay. Evidence is not, oh, this is what I believe. No. Do I expect King to say that he's a Marxist? No, I do not. But when he writes specifically of the incompatibility between Christianity and communism, and Chad's response is, well, of course he would say that he's a Marxist. Then at a certain point, when like this is a circular argument, right? What I find interesting is that Chad will believe King, and he writes in his own words, and we'll get to this later, when he denies the sort of bodily resurrection of Christ. And when King writes about his theological views, Chad believes him. But when he writes about his economic views, specifically against communism, then he says, of course, that's what a lying communist would do.
If your family cheated you out of billions,
And I'm gonna bring it to a close right there for the day. We'll finish it up tomorrow. With tomorrow's live, we'll finish breaking this down through the entirety. And that's a great question that he posed. Going to tomorrow, so we'll have something to look forward to. Um, and what he's doing is he's doing, like I say, this is why it's really tough. In my opinion, pointless to have these type of debate with uh educated people because they come into the debate not actually wanting to learn. Now, only reason I say it wouldn't be pointless is if it's a crowd of people, like in this setting where he's on this YouTube channel. I'm sure other people covered it. I'm covering it, and the outsiders they gonna form an opinion on who right, but you're not changing people like this mind because they educated and they have all this education. And for them to give all that up and take your stance, you're not educated, just gonna hurt their pride. So they'll do all this filibustering like he's doing, talking about nothing and attacking everything, constantly moving the goalposts. It's just pointless. And so now what he's doing is he's saying, "Oh, so you saying that you'll believe King about this?" But you know what he's saying. You know what he's saying. Chad Jackson is one of those people who's very calm, no matter what. He's stoic. He stays poised. He's very explanatory. He's very calm. He's explaining himself very well. He's not talking fast. He's not over talking himself like sometimes I may do because he's been doing this for a while. So no, you know exactly what he's saying. We're gonna let Mr. Chad Jackson reply tomorrow. But I thank y'all for joining this live, and I'll see y'all tomorrow. God bless.